Hi, I'm Bob Acton, the host of the Color and Ceramics podcast. My guest today is Teresa Wyss, a small batch potter working from her home studio where she creates functional ceramic art. Teresa works in porcelain, stoneware, and uses the sgraffito technique, hand carving designs into slip-covered surfaces. With black slip paired with bright glazes, her work has a striking graphic quality that recalls sort of a rustic woodcut print. Her designs are inspired by wildlife, the Canadian landscape, and the vivid colors of nature. Originally from Cornwall, Ontario, Teresa now makes her home in Calgary, Alberta, where she can be closer to the mountains. She holds a bachelor's degree in geography from the University of Guelph and has studied ceramics at Medalta in Medicine Hat and at the Glebe in Ontario. So let's get to the interview. Teresa, thank you so much for joining us on the Color and Ceramics podcast here today. I'm really excited about having you on board to talk about, some of your really beautiful work that you do that's highly colorful and really fits with the Color and Ceramics podcast notion of us focusing on surface design. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Now, I wonder if you could start off a little bit, tell us a little bit about your journey in clay. So you didn't start just yesterday. So there's a story to your work and how you got into this, and so tell us a little bit about that, please.
Sure. I started a really long time ago. I think I took art in high school way back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I was drawn to the clay then. I would have always had the desire to be an artist of some kind, but I have a real stumbling block with drawing. So I think that's why I really enjoyed the sculptural aspect of clay, and that's kind of what I did during high school. But then was sort of promoted at the time to be, taking a career that you could do something with and make, and that wasn't really where I grew up. A big thing that people sort of appreciated working in the field of art. And then so I took a big hiatus, and then after I got married and I stayed home with the kids, and my husband is from a very big art family, and so he kind of encouraged me, yeah, you should do it. So I took a couple of courses, and then one year he bought me as a surprise this really handmade old kick wheel, and it was massive, and a little tiny kiln. And I was kind of almost a little bit like not angry, but like, well, what am I going to do with this? I've got 3 kids and we don't have anywhere to set it up. Anyway, so it sort of spooled from there, and then I've never looked back. I just love it, and I've been doing it full time since 2011, 2012, something like that.
Oh, wow. So you're really into it. And I would see you as I would call it a production potter in the sense that you're producing quite a bit of work, although you call yourself a small batch potter. But what's the difference between my notion of a production potter where you're doing a lot of the same pieces versus you talking about it as small batch?
That's actually kind of an excellent question, because both are perfectly fine explanations on how you describe what you do and how you make your work. But I always think that I'm not really production because I make such a small amount of work, and the throwing aspect of my work could be more viewed as production. Like I sit down and I will, especially maybe not so much in the last couple of years, but I'll throw like 60 or 90 mugs in a day. And then then I prepare them for the carving. But I think I review myself as more of a small, because every piece that I do is different on the celebration. So there's no repetition. So no one they can ask me for sets, but I don't really do that. And even if they say, can we have 4 mugs? And I'll say yes, but they're not going to be the same. They'll be sort of the same size, sort of the same dimension, but every carving is done sort of from scratch. So that's why I say small batch.
Okay, cool, cool. And it is true. I've got one of your mugs here in my hand with my coffee in it this morning. There you can see it. And it's and it would obviously be unique each one because you're hand carving them. We'll talk a bit about that in a sec, but you're hand carving each one using your particular method. So um this is an audio only podcast, and so that may seem odd to some people because we're talking about a visual object with just audio. Could you describe for people what your pieces are like, what you're trying to achieve with your work, and to give people a sense? I hope they go to your website, of course, and find out about you, but could you kind of describe a piece for us?
Yeah. Um, so it's sort of the whole journey of how I ended up doing what I do started in the fact, I think, as I mentioned, that I like the sculptural aspect of clay. But I wanted to, I'm kind of also an incredibly practical person. So I like things to have a function, even though I love art, but there art that you display. I just love the idea of having something that you can hold and use and also be functional, which I wanted to tie in with the carving. So that's why I started slowly over time developing the way I do my technique. So I like it, the mugs especially, that you can hold the mug in your hand. And I always make a good substantial handle, but you can also wrap your hands around and feel the texture of the carving. So it's not just a visual for me, it's also very tactile, that they can feel the raised surface. And I took me a while to experimenting with glazes to make sure that it covered sufficiently without masking too much of that carved feeling that you have when you're holding the object.
So texture is pretty important to you.
Yes,
Yeah.
hugely. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I took a class on sgraffito years ago, and the person I was taking the class from said to me, "Oh, Bob, you're digging your tools very deep into the clay." And her perspective was to do it very lightly into the clay. And then she told a story of how a client had come into her studio who was blind, and he bought pieces based on the feel of it. He was buying gifts for somebody, I think. Not that that matters, but he was using his feel of the piece. And so he really appreciated the deep cuts that she would make in something. So it really does fit with what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And I definitely do a deeper carve than what traditionally people do with sgraffito. Most of the time, people do their design and then they use a little line to accentuate, or whereas I kind of do a little bit more of the opposite, where I cover the entire vessel in the slip and then I remove most of it, leaving the just the outline. So I can really, I like to have like areas where the color will pool into the various different designs that I do once I'm applying the underglaze.
Hmm. Yeah, very interesting. So what are you trying to achieve with these? What's your sort of design thoughts about this? And because many of the pieces that you're making have sort of a floral design. You've got flowers and all those kinds of things. I know that you're, because I know you and I know that you like being in the bush, as I call it, being out in nature. Is that really a driving force behind some of your designs?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Like I love doing the flowers. I like the mountains. I did a lot of mountain series for a while ago. And um I think the reason I am so drawn to the flowers is because they're so incredibly forgiving. Like you can create a flower in what, and I always call it in my style, because when people ask me, "Oh, is this a sunflower?" and I say, "Yeah, it's my depiction of a sunflower. It's not a perfect, accurate representation of a sunflower, but for me, it is." So, and that's where I find it. Sometimes people will look at my work and they'll say, "Oh, this is a calendula," and I'll be like, "Yes." And then other times they'll look at it and they'll say, "This is a daisy."
Yeah.
So I think that's why I'm drawn to the flowers most of all, because it's not so rigid in the fact, when you draw or you do a face, because I know you do a lot of
Yeah,
sculpture things,
yeah,
and the eyes just slightly off,
yeah,
it's wrong.
yeah,
Whereas I get a petal and it's just not quite right. It's just bending in the wind,
yeah,
or
yeah,
something happened to it along the way. So I kind of, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a fantastic drawer. So I kind of am embracing the skill set that I feel like I do have. And I, because I don't feel like I draw really accurately, I can embrace that with this carving technique.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very nice. And you were saying that, so let's talk a little bit about your technique and the materials you work with. So you're using do you use porcelain or stoneware, or what kind of clay do you use?
I use the clay from Madalta in the M370. So they call it a porcelain stoneware. So it's kind of like a halfway between, which I'm sure you know that. I like it because it's a little bit robust and kind of fairly forgiving on the wheel, but yet really, really smooth and buttery for the carving. I don't have a lot of grog or imperfection, like not imperfections, but rougher pieces. So I use that, and I also like the pop of the white. And then I make my own black slip to put on top. So I don't really use an glaze. Over the years, I've tried a bunch and I really like this one. And it's a little bit thicker, and I do 3 coats so that I can create the depth with that. And then I sketch it, and then I carve into it and reveal the white that way.
Hmm. Yeah, very good. And so then the other colors that you use, those are commercial slips or underglazes that you're using?
There's a healthy mix. I actually love mixing my own.
Oh
I
yeah.
love that part. Yeah, so that was another thing I really love. I love to paint, and I used to paint before I got into pottery.
Ah.
But again, you have to draw really well. So
Yeah.
this really ties nicely together for me because I get to do the carving and I get to play with all the color, which is just for a long time I used to just do my designs black and white with the color accent glaze. And then I just all of a sudden thought, I might add some color. So now I'm really enjoying, I buy the mason stains online or at a ceramics place. And I mix the colors, like I'll do like a 20% of this color, and then I have a white base that I use and add it to, and then I decide percentages, test tiles, test tiles, test tiles, and I have a whole wall in the studio of little tiny tiles, and then I will take the tiles to my work and combine them and visually to see how they're going to fire and decide from there.
That's a wonderful palette I can imagine in front of
It
you on the
is.
wall, right? Yes.
It's so much fun. Yeah. And then even when I'm painting, I layer them while I'm painting, or sometimes I mix them. I have a little palette that I have on the side, and I'll mix two together to get a different depth to the orange. And so that's another reason why nothing turns out the same 2 times.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. That is great. That is great. And it's so immediate, isn't it? Because what you see is what you get in lots of ways when you're using this kind of technique. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's and then you finish it with a glaze, do you? Or is the
I
outside?
do.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So I do a clear glaze on, especially on the inside, and then for a bowl or a mug, I will do an accent color of on the handle and the rim of the mug or the rim of the bowl, just for another little extra pop of color that ties in.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool. Now, you said you've gone from learning and enjoying the practice to a business in a way because you're doing this full time. And I think often artists, excuse me, often artists think about the work that they're doing, the creative side of things, and then struggle with the business side of things because that's not what they got into it for in the first place, right? It was to make beautiful things. And so if you've been doing a full-time practice for 15 years, that means you've been very successful at your practice at doing this. Can you talk a little bit about what that's been like for you to move into the business side of art.
Yeah, hard. It was, um it's not, you're right, it's exactly right. It's not what I got into it for. And there's so much outside of just the business aspect of it, like the art part of it. There's the whole bookkeeping and taxes and um social media marketing, going to sales, promoting yourself, which I think a lot of us who go into art full time, especially, are not really the kind of people who are considered extroverts. So it's difficult to put yourself out there and promote. Um, I'm really learning and have been for a while to um, delegate. So and hire people to kind of help me with things like the social media. I'm not very good at that, but my daughter, who is also in art, is from a young age been like, "Oh, I'll help you with that." So I pay her. I have been for a while, and then I send her video, and she sets that up. That that was a huge thing for me to
Hmm.
to walk away from that aspect of it. And yeah, like just coming to being comfortable with going to galleries, dropping off my stuff and saying, that's money well paid in the percentage that they keep,
Hmm.
because now free up more time for me to do my practice. Yeah. So it's constantly for me finding a balance between um, time in the studio, which is obviously what we all want to do, and all the nasty admin stuff that you have to do on the side.
Yeah.
So usually what I do is every year I think, okay, I'm going to push myself to do something a little bit uncomfortable, and whatever that may be. Maybe it's like to try and make me better in the field that I've chosen to work
Mm.
in.
Mm.
So, but this year, my goal is every week I spend at least 2 hours in my office rather than in the studio waiting until it's absolutely last minute and I have to get the stuff done.
I had a friend years ago who put every invoice, bill, receipt that he ever got in a cardboard box beside his desk, and then he would take this cardboard box over to the bookkeeper at the end of the year. And I think there was a lot missing from that cardboard box, would be my guess. So I know what you mean. It's really interesting, hey, because you're talking about discipline and how do I have the discipline to make 90 mugs in one day of sitting down? That takes discipline on the creative side, getting your fingers working, and there's also discipline on the administrative side, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's interesting because the getting into the studio, people sometimes will say to me like, "Oh, do you ever get tired of it? Do you feel like um, you've lost your drive or your love of what you're doing because you're producing so much?" And that never really happens to me. I as soon as sometimes I wake up and I think, ugh, but then I get out there and I'm immediately excited, and I there's tons of things I want to do. But I do have to be disciplined with the other side of it. And especially how fast it seems technology moves. Like you're online, you've got your website, then you have to have a place to sell online, and then you get, oh yeah, I've got this figured out, and then oh, now something else happens in the world and you have to pivot and readjust and find the new technology and learn all of that. So there are days where I think, is this worth it? And then I realize, yeah, it really is. So
It is true. I ran a small business, did a lot of business coaching for people in leadership positions. And one of the things that always strikes me is that small business means you have to do everything. You're changing the light bulbs, you're mopping the floor, you're making the widget, you're selling the widget, you're doing everything. And really, that's for a solo practitioner like yourself. That is really true, isn't it? You have to do everything unless you delegate.
and I'm lucky enough to have my daughter. I mean, I don't know, every year I think, oh, she's very busy herself now because she's 27 and she lives away. But no, she's also in the art field, so she feels like she's learning from me, which eventually she wants to open her own practice. So, it's for sure. There's a downside to delegating too, because then you're out of the loop, and then if I ever have to take it back, it's going to be like a huge learning curve again for me. But for now, I'm just enjoying it.
Awesome. So you do some delegation around social media? How about other things? Do you have any other people you delegate to?
Yeah, I do. I do my own bookkeeping just because of my system is complicated, and I feel like the effort to explain it to somebody would be not worth it. But accountant for sure. I hand everything over to them and pay happily to have that done. And then sort of delegating with the selling, I'm galleries, saying yes, please sell my work for me because it's a lot, as every time you're sitting at, all that work to get ready for the sale, and then the transportation and the cost if you're going out of town, and then the fee for being there, and then your time you've got 2 days of setup and takedown, and then the 4 days that you're sitting in. That's all days where I could be producing. So I had to kind of, I don't know if that falls under the headline of delegating, but I had to be very choosy about how I spent my time, so I'm maximizing my time profitably, if you want. Even though none of us really go into this line of work for the money, but you don't also want to be doing it and giving it away because it undervalues what everybody else is doing.
Yep, absolutely. But I do think taking stuff to a gallery or having somebody else do that selling work, however that's done, really is another aspect of delegation. Your business incorporates all of it, from making the product to selling it to shipping it to all of those kinds of things, right? And so if you've got pieces to do that, then we can let the gallery do that work for them. And sometimes artists say, "Oh, they take 50%. I'm not doing that." And I go, "Well, no, that might be money well worth spent." They find the client, do it, ship it, they do all of that stuff. So it, in my opinion, seems to be worth it at that level.
Absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly, especially when you get up to a certain price point in your work that I started out years ago going to like little church sales and community sales, and that's great when you're starting out, but once you get to a certain point, you have to be reaching out to the people who are willing or can understand why the items are what they cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And galleries have collectors out there who may wish to spend a bit more than somebody at a church sale. And so uh, that's another aspect of galleries that you're tapping into when you move into that world.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so you mentioned price. Let's talk a bit about that because I think that's a big interest to many people. Um, Tell us about your journey in pricing, because you probably didn't start off today or a few years ago at the same price you are today. So how do you make your determinations around pricing structures and all that? So give us some insight into your practice there.
Yeah, pricing is one of those things that I constantly have trouble with. So we know that we can't really look at it in the way that a traditional business would look at it, where you look at the cost of your materials and then your time. Because if we count in our time, it would be ridiculously expensive and how much. And I don't really love the idea of sacrificing my art to make it a certain price point for people. So I do kind of, I guess what I do is I look at what other people are making. I keep, I have quite a few people that I sort of, you know, keep an eye on.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, for sure.
I love going, I also, one thing that I really like doing is I go to galleries. Like I was just dropping off at the Craft Council in Calgary, and I asked them, I said, how do you find my price point? Like, do you think it's because I'm finding everything's getting more expensive, the clay, all the glazing materials,
You bet.
everything. Even cost of living in the home is getting
Yeah,
expensive.
for sure.
So I also don't want to be, like I mentioned earlier, undercutting other people, because that's not great, right?
Hmm.
You're evaluating what you do as well. So I ask them, and they're very great. They're great. They're always very happy, and they take me through and they say, well, there's this, but we always tell people you hand carve everything. And comparing is great, or not necessarily comparing, but making sure you're comparable in the price point is a big one for me. But what we do, all of us, is so vastly different in the ceramic world that you can't look at one mug and say, well, why is theirs this and mine's that? Because we the time and experience, there's so many things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I am. And then mostly what I do is I put it out there. And then if it sells, I go, no. But every time, literally every time I raise the price and I put it out, I'm worried. I think, have I gone too far? And then it sells and I go, okay, it's all right. But most of the time I hear from other potters is, you're not charging enough.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's hard. Really, it's a hard question. And I hope I answered that. I don't know if I really did, but
Well, yeah, I think so because I experienced the same thing. I was at a show this last Christmas season, and one of the other ceramic folks came over and said, "Bob, your stuff is way too cheap." And I've heard that before, same as you, right? And so, I think that does reflect um, on this notion of how do we price things? What are we comparing our price to? In these days with social media that we chatted about earlier, we at least I follow a lot of people in the US, and of course their prices seem higher, and the dollar difference is significant between the Canadian and the American dollar, right? So if you start to do your equations and look at your numbers, you go, wow, those guys are charging a ton for a mug, right? And so then you get into conversations like that with clients. It's a challenge to figure out how much do we charge for our work.
it really is. Yeah. And I don't think I have any solution other than just trial and error and talking to people. It's hard when to talk to other potters, because if you do really well and you're selling quite well, and then they're like, your prices aren't high enough. But, and then what if you go too high and then you're sitting there and you've spent all that time and effort to get to a show or make your work, then, so it's hard. It really is hard. But galleries, I find a really great resource to talk to them, because they know, and they are completely not biased. They're unbiased. They want your work to sell,
Totally.
but they also want you to get what your work is deserving.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's interesting how it just dawned on me that really when you ask a gallery about prices, you're asking an expert in their field about it. Just like we ask the other people that we delegate to, the accountant, we ask the accountant what, her or his expertise is, and so we gather that information. The social media, what's your expertise there that we should use in our business? And same thing for the pricing, that often you should really be going out to people who are experts or people who have a lot of experience with the pricing in the area that you're working in.
yeah, that's actually an excellent point. I'm a big advocate of, if you hire somebody, let them do their job. And
Totally.
that's why you've hired them, because they know what, hopefully better than you do. Otherwise, you'd
Yeah.
be doing it yourself.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So, have you run into any problems with galleries? Sometimes people will tell little stories about problems with galleries, but have you experienced any of that with your work out there?
With pricing, do you mean, or
Yeah, with,
just
with anything, I guess.
sometimes in the beginning, I guess I did, if it was smaller galleries, I really found that it was important for me to monitor what I was dropping off and what I was getting paid for. That was a big
Mm,
one. That took a long time to sort of filter out who I was going to sell with. And because again, it's more administrative tasks that I often don't have time for. But and it's hard, especially when you've been there for a really long time. You you have to develop trust with them because you can't be checking every single time. So that was a probably the hardest thing. I don't think I've really had any problems with them ever coming at me with price issues. Like I've never had them say you're charging too much, but I have had this one gallery that I've been with for years. They did say to me this Christmas, your stuff is selling really quickly. We think you should up your price a little bit. And so I was like, okay, great, thank you. I appreciate that because you don't want to be in that position of just cranking out stuff and destroying. I heard this person, it was a potter, and they were saying it's a finite the amount of stuff that I can make in my
Yeah.
lifetime. And I don't want to destroy my body for the sake of selling my work $5 or $10 cheaper, because there's only so many things that I'm able to make.
Hmm.
So but yeah, as far as galleries, I think that's pretty much the only I have now where I only have a few that I sell with, and I'm super happy with the ones that I'm
Yeah.
with. But it took a long time to kind of find that, and I would encourage people to interview them before you go, which is not something I did because I was so happy. They'd
Yes.
say, "Yes, I'll take your work," or they'd contact me, and
Yeah.
I'd be
Yeah.
so flattered. I'd be like, "Yes," but
Yeah.
really, you should look at them carefully, like how long they've been around, whose work do they carry, talk to the other people who have their work with them, say, "Are you happy with them?" Because it's a big trust issue to drop your work
Yeah.
because you take a couple of boxes and that represents like months of work for you.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you want to make sure that they understand that. So I think that's my probably my biggest advice is just make sure you can trust them kind of.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting about how we should be interviewing them.
Yeah.
It sort of strikes me, this is kind of like dating in a way, right? I haven't dated somebody for a long time, so I'm pulling out old memories here, but you're really sort of checking each other out when you're going on dates, right? And
Yeah.
same thing with galleries. You should be checking them out, not just saying, yes, I'll go out for coffee with you to anybody, right?
It's true, and I think I'm speaking mostly of myself, but I think I'm assuming a lot of us feel, a little bit like that imposter syndrome, like you're making your work and you like it, but you're always second guessing it. And I think that's what makes us good artists is that we're critical of our own work, so we're always improving. However, you have to remember that your stuff is worth it. And you have to, and I'm saying this because I try and practice that. I'm not very good at it, but you have to go out there and say, well, yeah, thank you. I would love to be represented by your gallery, but you're also lucky to have me, which I don't do, but I'm just saying that for people, that's what we should be doing is like,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I
because with
think it's a mutual thing, right? They should be
that's
checking us out to see whether they like us, and not only the work, but they have to relate to us as a person because we are having a relationship with the gallery. This is not just transactional of us handing over a piece of fired clay and getting some money back. It's a relationship you're developing with them, isn't it?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, now, could you give us an idea of what a younger, that's not the right phrase, I shouldn't bring age in here, an emerging artist, somebody who's newer into the field, what advice might you have for them in terms of getting better and improving and so on their work?
Well, I think I think the hardest stumbling block for in when I was starting, and I see it sometimes with people who are starting out, is that you just have to be tenacious. Like if you love it, then you just have to keep going because it's so easy to get discouraged. There's so many things that can discourage you, like price, not earning enough money. You think, well, I could go out and get a job and do better, or I shouldn't say a job, but like a different type of job. Um, it can be hard on your self-esteem. You set get ready, you set up a whole show, and then 5 people show up, or 100 people show up and you only sell one thing. And this is all the things that happen to you at the beginning. It's normal for everyone, but you have to just keep going and have um, faith in yourself that you chose this for a reason. You chose it because it speaks to you. So don't give up on it, because it's worth it for
Hmm.
other reasons than financial reasons. And that was talk about setting, like, you know, I set a rule for myself. I do a show and I have to do it 3 times, that same show. Because once you start, the first time you're there, people don't know you. They're not really willing to buy your stuff, or they're a little bit hesitant because they don't know who you are. And then the second time they go, oh, I remember you from last year. And somehow that kind of in their mind makes you maybe a bit more credible, even though they might like your work. They want to know. And then the third time, if it's still not great, you can cut and run. But that was kind of my way of not getting discouraged at the beginning. Like, it was hard, it's hard when you go there and you sit there forever. And if you can, bring a buddy. Man, does that ever help? As you know, I'm sure, when you're sitting in the booth for a couple hours and nobody's come by, and you can at least play a game of solitaire under the
Yeah, yeah,
table or
yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah. It's an interesting mental experience being in a show like that where you're trying to sell your work, isn't it? Like you have
Oh
to. I remember one show I do regularly, and the first year people would walk by and not look in my booth, and I'd have some anxiety about that, and why aren't people coming? All that. Now I don't care anymore, right? Because I think, well, whoever comes in wants to come in. So I've had to learn to manage my own nervousness or insecurities around that.
yeah, for sure. I think it kind of, in a lot of ways, it's made me a better person, because I go out and you do these things and you get sort of tested, for the lack of a better word, and by putting yourself out there. And a lot of times you do get negative, or they don't want to make eye contact, because then they might talk to you or something.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things that you mentioned that I think is really true is that it's really important to go back to what really is most important for you. So, yes, we can talk about price and what your booth looks like and are people selling, but what's critical is to go back to the core reasons, to the base, to the kind of the North Star that you might have for yourself in terms of what you're trying to achieve, what's driving you here around the whole art experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, we go into it because we love what we're doing, but I also love the whole lifestyle of it. I love that I set my own day. I love that, and I'm for a lot of people that doesn't work, and that's totally fine. But I love that. I love that I get up in the morning and I know, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then something happens and I pivot, but it's all still kind of what I want to do. So, obviously there's stuff I don't love doing, but I still do them because I know that it's the lifestyle and the thing that I really, and at the end of the day, I try and explain this to my husband, and he gets it because he's in the art field too. But at the end of the day, when I'm leaving the studio and I look back and I go, wow, I just made like 30 mugs today on the wheel. Like, they're sitting there ready, and it feels good. You know, like, for me, I have done those types of jobs where you're working at an office and you have a lot of other lovely aspects to that job, of community, social, and the regular paycheck and whatever else. But you come out and you're like, what did I really do today?
Hmm.
You know, there's some stuff through for somebody else or whatever. And that's great. It works for a lot of
Sure.
people. That's, I have to just keep reminding myself, especially when I have the unpleasant tasks, that, well, it's a payoff for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting for me. What I'm relating to is the whole notion of having something tangible at the end of the day. And I used to work in the field where I didn't have anything tangible. And so having a concrete piece of clay, a mug or a sculpture or something is really important for me because then it's something I can look at and I can talk to myself about whether it's finished or not. But it's there, it's a piece, it's three-dimensional.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I can touch it. Yeah, yeah.
And there's nothing quite like that feeling when you open up the kiln at the end, and you open it and you pull out like, and maybe there's like five things in there, and you go, wow, that's
Yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah, 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 absolutely. Hey, Teresa, thanks so much for joining us today on the Color and Ceramics podcast. This has been fantastic, and I think people will really enjoy our conversation and hear what you've got to say around your practice and delegation and pricing and the business side of clay. I think has been really helpful for people. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah, thanks.